Hello viewers and welcome to another match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today it's another video sent in by Omega Sector Gaming, and on the left making his coverage debut is Bryan Koppang, and for today's game he's playing as our third Space Marines faction warlord Chaplain Mavros. Sitting directly opposite we have Ryan Murrell playing instead as the Tyranid subject Ω-X62113, with his synapse unit of choice being the Stalking Lictor. Planet 1 is Planum, which affords its victor with the opportunity to relocate a friendly non-warlord unit to the target planet of their choice. Our initiative token is currently held by our Space Marine, and Mavros' first deploy action is to position a copy of Blood Angels Veterans at planet number 1. For the cost of 3, it's a 3/3 soldier trait common army unit with a command icon, and so long as it remains ready every time it's dealt damage, you prevent the first point thereof. Mavros himself is a 2/7, and he has an action where you can target one of your Space Marine faction units at a blue technology icon possessing planet, deal it a point of damage, but it also gains a +1 attack value bonus which persists until the end of the phase. That's a limit twice per phase effect. Mavros can target himself with it once he arrives at a blue planet, but during deploy there's scarcely a better recipient than a Blood Angels Veterans, and it looks like that's exactly what we're seeing at planet number 1. We've got a token indicating that our players are presumably taking advantage of that action for 2 consecutive deploy stalls. You deal a point of damage to the Blood Angels Veterans, but it's ready, so therefore it prevents that damage, and you can do that twice in a row to get as much information as possible, because in this video it looks like our Tyranid has already passed. We see a second copy of Blood Angels Veterans currently stationed at planet number 2, and at planet number 5 we've got a copy of the lowly 1-cost 10th Company Scout. It may just be a 2/1, but it's just as eligible for myriad powerful events as is any other Space Marine. Both of our players are deciding where exactly they want to send their warlords and or synapse units. I wouldn't be surprised to see it looks like planet number 4 is going to be the destination for both players' warlords, with the Stalking Lictor arriving at 5. Planet number 3, we've got a copy of Scything Hormagaunts, which has infested that planet, so keep your eye out for a predation. Planet number 1, that's going to be a resource and a card for Mavros. Planet number 2 is going to be a couple of cards for Mavros. Planet 3, a couple of resources for Subject Omega. Planet number 4 is going to be nothing for either player, and thanks to the Stalking Lictor, Planet 5 is going to be a couple of resources gained by our Tyranid. So, looks like that Blood Angels Veterans is going to be able to win planet number 1 entirely uncontested. That's going to be a blue and green icon added to the victory display of Mavros, and it looks like this is a fantastic opportunity to harass the hell out of the enemy warlord, because note, Mavros currently possesses initiative. If that Blood Angels Veterans is positioned at planet number 4. Looks like that was not actually the case. The Blood Angels Veterans is instead going to be shifted to planet number 2 to presumably just set up to win that planet again uncontested, but we could have seen the Blood Angels Veterans ready show up at 4. It would have had initiative. Mavros could have pinged it twice, and then it could have swung for a colossal 5 at Subject Omega, and with or without, well, with Crushing Blow, that could have resulted in a first turn bloodying of that warlord. Looks like predation spreads the infestation from planet number 3 to planet number 4, and it looks like the reason that I'm... Okay, so we see a copy of Eager Recruit played out to planet number 4. That seems a little bit premature, but I suppose we'll have to see what exactly our Space Marine player is intending to do with it. He does have initiative. The Eager Recruit swings for 2 Noxious Flesh Boar being discarded as a shield means that it's only 1 dealt to Subject Omega, but because his current planet is infested, that means Gene Stealer cards in our Tyranid player's hand can be played as though they have Ambush, and we see exactly that. That's going to be a 1-cost Gene Stealer Prowler ambushed at that planet. It takes a swing at something, but a discarded Black Sword means that 2 minus 2 is, of course, 0. So the Genestealer Prowler is unsuccessful in regard to being able to deal out damage. It's possible that Mavros could target himself with his ability and then swing for 4 at Subject Omega. Again, Crushing Blow could have resulted in a possible bloodying of that Warlord, but Mavros attacks for 2. Subject Omega is already at 3 points of damage. Looks like we see one of our newest Tyranid faction army units. That's the Genestealer Brood being played at that planet. It's a 3-cost, 1-command icon, 3/2 Genestealer. It's, again, ambushed, and it affords you the opportunity to look at the top 6 cards of your deck for a Genestealer card to reveal it, and then to subsequently add that to your hand. Looks like it may chain off of itself. It found a second copy of Genestealer Brood. It's our Tyranid's opportunity to attack. He takes a swing, and that's going to be a second copy of the Black Sword. Mavros takes 1 point of damage. That is a Genestealer Prowler being ambushed into play. Good lord, that's a lot of Genestealers. That's another 2-shield card being discarded. The Genestealer Prowler is basically its damage is mitigated down down to 0. Looks like that's a copy of Drop Pod Assault discarded as a shield, and god, that is just a miserable card to have to throw away. But let's see what happens. We see a second copy of Genestealer Brood drop into play. I believe that its ability whiffed, but it is regardless going to have an opportunity to attack again. It's going to be swinging for 3, and it looks like we did manage to see a successful few points of damage dealt out to Mavros there. Subject Omega launches his own attack, and now that's going to be a dead copy of Eager Recruit, and we come to the end of the combat round. Mavros has to decide whether or not he wants to retreat first. He does decide to remove himself from that planet, and now Subject Omega is going to have the opportunity to trigger Aatrox Prime. Looks like Aatrox fires at planet number 5. That's going to be a dead 10th Company Scout, and now even though Mavros is set up rather well to win at planet number 1, the Tyranid player is looking superior in an economic sense, and really all that our Tyranid player is going to have to do, presuming he's going to let planet number 1 pass him by, is prevent Mavros from being able to pick up a single additional blue planet. He's currently heavily deployed units to Aatrox Prime, which is blue, and then planet number 5 is also blue, so he'll have to look out for that. But if he picks up planets, say, well, I guess planet number 2 is kind of irrelevant, but if he sweeps 3, 4, and 5, we could see a Tyranid victory through red icons. But looks like we've gone through an HQ phase. That's 2 cards and 4 resources for each of our players. Our initiative token passes over to our Tyranid. We've got a copy of Virulent Spore Sacs at 4. That's going to be another means of infesting. It's a 2-cost, 1-command icon, 0/1. As a combat action, you sacrifice it, you deal a point of damage to all present enemy units, and you infest the current planet, which enables Subject Omega to start ambushing Genestealers. At that same planet, immediately opposite, we've got a copy of one of our Black Templars trait units. It's a Righteous Initiate, 2-cost, 1-command icon, 1/2. It's got the Unstoppable specialization where whenever it's dealt, well, the first time it's dealt damage during a round, you prevent the first point of damage, and then it gains +2 attack for the remainder of the phase. So it's not at a blue planet, but it can still deal quite a bit of damage. For command, both of our players decide to commit their respective warlords to planet number 5. Subject Omega can, like, what we could see is we could see the Spore Sacs detonate at 4, then we could see Predation infest planet number 5 if Mavros ends up exhausted at some point, but it's going to be Tyranid initiative, so it'll be up to Omega whether or not he wants to retreat or risk being bloodied by a possible 4 swing of Mavros. But planet number 1 is going to be a couple of cards for our Space Marine. Elwith is the current first planet. That, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and add 1 to your hand planet. That's the battle ability that's on the line. It's a currently uninfested planet. Planet number 2 is going to be a couple of resources for our Tyranid. Planet number 3 is going to be a card and a resource for our Tyranid. Planet number 4, the destination of the Stalking Lictor. It being 1/4 with 2 command icons, that means 3 command icons beats 1, and that's going to be another couple of resources for our Tyranid. Planet number 5 is going to be no command income for either player. Elwith looks like that is going to be handily captured by our Mavros player, and he's going to be able to benefit from that effect. Subject Omega uses his first combat turn in order to retreat, and Karnath is going to be able to trigger any number of different planets. Looks like that is maybe, yes, Ossus 4, so that's going to be -1 resource for Subject Omega, +1 resource for Mavros. We're in the process of going through another HQ phase. That is +4 resources, +2 cards for each player. Mavros once again picks up the initiative token, and now we see our 5th, 7th, last planet of the game. It is Boundless, the forced random card discard planet. Planet number 1 is currently infested. It is Ossus 4. It's the Steel Resource planet, and Mavros' movement this phase is going to be rather restricted owing to the presence of those Blood Angels veterans in his HQ. So this could be a very easy victory indeed for Mavros if he has a copy of Exterminatus in hand. He can simply purge Planet 2 of Xenos, like he could, I guess I was saying he doesn't have a Blood Angels veterans at 4, but if he did, or if he had a 3 HP unit or something along those lines, he could ping it a couple of times with Mavros to deploy stall and then use Exterminatus. So just based on that stalling ability, I'll be very curious indeed to see how often Exterminatus is used with Chaplain Mavros, just because Subject Omega is certainly subject to potentially being decimated by that event, but it's not often that Space Marines run it nowadays, so we'll have to see if Mavros did come across a copy of that card or not. But regardless, the Scything Hormigaunt sitting upon planet number 1, they're a 2-cost, 2/2 with a command icon, and that is pretty much that. In regard to where Subject Omega would want to go, he could go to, say, planet number 4, which I think is probably the most likely destination for Mavros, but if that happens, then he's going to have to... Like, if Subject Omega arrives at planet number 4, the likely victory condition for Mavros, he'll risk having to give up that battle ability. He won't have initiative, so Mavros might be able to swing for 5 or more if he's got Vow of Honor in his hand, the signature event where when one of your SM units takes damage, it gets +3 attack until the remainder of the phase. So I think if Subject Omega were foolhardy enough to go to planet number 4, he'd definitely be risking being outright bloodied, and I think planet 5 wouldn't be the worst idea in the world for Subject Omega to go there, get a couple of cards, do that forced random card discard, and it looks like planet number 1 is kind of contested a little bit by Chaplain Mavros. It's a bit of a bummer that we see the Reclusium Templar at planet number 1 just because Mavros has initiative. The Reclusium Templar are a 3-cost, 1 command icon, 2/3. They've got the Unstoppable specialization, so the first time they take damage during a round, you prevent the first point of damage, and then you ready that unit. But, never mind. I got it completely wrong. So the first time they take damage, they are readied, so you want initiative so that you get the opportunity to swing first, and then your opponent swings in response. My apologies for getting that backwards. So that is a great play. That's a good location for those Reclusium Templar, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Virulent Spore Sacs, now played to planet number 1, trigger that Unstoppable specialization prior to the Reclusium Templars being exhausted, so I feel like a bit of an idiot for getting that backwards. Commentating too many Gorzod games, too much Goes Fasta specialization in my brain. But at planet number 1, we've got a copy of the White Scars Biker. It's going to be a 3-cost, 1 command icon, 2/3 soldier trait common Space Marines faction army unit. Whenever a Warlord is present, you boost it up to a 4 attack value. Also at planet number 1, we've got a second copy of Scything Hormigaunt, so both of our players are deciding where exactly they want to send their respective Warlords. Mavros, I predict 4. Subject Omega, I predict 5. Am I right? I am wrong. Okay, looks like Mavros is going to be showing up at planet number 2 to try to fight off all of those Tyranids. Let's see if this ends up being a bit of a death sentence for those poor Space Marines, because that's going to be 2 3/2 attackers and 2 2/2 attackers with a couple 3/3 exhausted Blood Angels veterans, but it looks like I was wrong on all counts. Subject Omega arrives at planet number 4, so command struggles. Planet number 1, it's going to be 2 command icons versus 3 command icons. That is 2 resources to the right for Subject Omega. Planet number 2 is going to be a card and a resource for Mavros. Planet number 3 is going to be 3 command icons versus 1 is 2 resources for Subject Omega, and planet number 4 is going to be a card and a resource for our our Gene Stealer trait Tyranid Warlord. So we're going to see battles at planets 1, 2, and 4, and let's see how this all gets resolved. The initiative is in the possession of our Space Marine, but we see our Virulent Spore Sacs explode. That's going to be the White Scars Biker, dealing a point of damage. That's going to be the Reclusium Templars, getting no benefit whatsoever apart from the damage reduction from their Unstoppable specialization. That planet was already heavily infested. We might see any number of Gene Stealers being ambushed into play, because the Tyranid player has been just raking in the income, as is abundantly clear by his tower of resources there. It looks like he's got at least 9? No, he's got at least 10 at his disposal, so wow. He could drop into play a 5-cost Ymgarl Gene Stealer to command icon 4/4, or Gene Stealer Prowler to attack for 2, Gene Stealer Brood to attack for 3, and I believe those are all of his current options. Well, of course, duh. The most obvious Gene Stealer in the world, it's the signature army unit, the Invasive Gene Stealers. Looks like we see not 1, but 2 copies of that unit being put into play. They're 3-cost 2/3s with a command icon, but whenever they interplay, you pick an enemy unit, an enemy army unit at that planet. It gets -1 HP for the remainder of the phase, and they get a +1 HP. So 2 of those back to back, that means 1 damage plus a -2 HP is resulting in a dead White Scars Biker. That's a big investment in that planet, but let's see if it pays off. That is the Reclusium Templar taking a swing. It's a dead copy of Scything Hormagaunts, and now I can only imagine that Templar is going to be absolutely just torn to shreds. So 1 swing from a Scything Hormagaunt means that those Scything Talons deal 2 points of damage to the Templar, and let's see. We've got an Eager Recruit being dropped into play, so for 1 resource, that's a 2/1, no command icons. That's a dead Scything Hormagaunt, and now that's Invasive Gene Stealer swinging, killing the Reclusium Templar. That's nothing from our Space Marine. That's Invasive Gene Stealers taking a 2nd swing and killing our Eager Recruit, and that is going to be a battle 1 by our Tyranid. Normally that would be +1 resource for the Tyranid, -1 resource for Chaplain Mavros, but of course you have to be holding resources for your opponent to steal any from you. So whether that was an accident or whether that was deliberate, either way Mavros ends up winning in that regard. So this is where things get interesting. If Mavros dares to attack, okay, he doesn't dare to attack, so I need not explain. I was gonna say if he attacks, he is definitely at risk of being bloodied. We could see more Tyranids being ambushed into play. Those Blood Angels veterans are exhausted. That's the Gene Stealer Brood taking an attack. We see another copy of Black Shield discarded as a shield, and at this point, just because there's so many Tyranids, why even bother shielding anything? So both of those Blood Angels veterans are going to be destroyed. That is Aatrox Prime that is going to fire at Chaplain Mavros' HQ. Homeboy Mavros sitting at 3 points of life remaining, 3 hit points in his reservoir left. And now, Subject Omega, what exactly are you going to activate? Are you going to do the forced random card discard? It looks like that's actually the case. Another option that, would have been perfectly fine, I suppose, would have been Aatrox Prime damaging Mavros for an additional point, but that forced random card discard was a copy of the Sword Brethren Dreadnought. Doesn't look like Mavros had enough resources to play that unit. A 7-cost 5/6 with 3 command icons. So, whatever. Point is, it's discarded. Wasn't doing Mavros any good, so Barless, you done goofed. But we've got another HQ phase in the process of being resolved. It's already gone by the time I talk about it. 4 resources, 2 cards for both of our players. No new 5th planet. Our last planet is currently planet number 4. Our current 1st planet is Aatrox Prime. It is infested. Our Tyranid has initiative. What exactly is Mavros going to do with his resources? Looks like he's not going to be able to do a whole hell of a lot, potentially. It's a copy of Catachan Outpost placed in his HQ. As a combat action, you can exhaust it, give one of your units a +2 attack value bonus for the remainder of the phase, for its next attack that phase. Kind of a more persistent but weaker version of his signature event, that Vow of Honor. And on our Tyranid side of the table, looks like that Gene Stealer Brood maybe picked up a copy of its either Regeneration or its Noxious Flesh Boar at planet number 1. Both of our players are deciding where they want to send their Warlords and their Synapse units. Note that planet number 1 is infested, but it's the only one that is. Perhaps we'll see Infestation spread the perhaps we'll see Predation spread the infestation, or we'll see the Virulent Spore Sacs at 2 infest that planet, and then we'll see the infestation spread via Predation to planet number 3. But Subject Omega has arrived at planet number 1, which is a very odd choice, although it is the opponent's victory condition, so I guess better safe than sorry. Our Tyranid player is a more conservative man than I'd have gone to probably planet number 4 myself. But actually, come to think of it, there were quite a few Tyranid units in the HQ of Subject Omega, so I'd have been rather likely to probably show up to planet number 3, which is the next earliest victory condition for Mavros, just because it's not as if our Space Marine has a lot of frightening units there. But planet number 1, regardless of what our players did, that's a card and a resource for our Tyranid. Planet number 2 is going to be a couple of resources for our Tyranid. That's the Stalking Lictor's destination. Planet number 3 is going to be a card and a resource for Mavros. Planet number 4 is going to be a couple of cards for Mavros. So planet number 1 was Aatrox Prime. It fired, I guess, at, it doesn't really matter, like the Righteous Initiate. Let's say that they were shot at that planet. If he even bothered to activate the battle ability, it did not actually do anything. Unstoppable prevented that point of damage. But Mavros won his battle at planet number 3. That was Karnath, triggering. I guess we're seeing Aatrox Prime being triggered, but that is unfortunately an illegal effect. Because Aatrox Prime was in the victory display at the time that that battle was won at Karnath, so that was a significant oversight on behalf of our players, because as is abundantly clear, that is a huge amount of damage being dealt out to our Tyranid players. So remember that a planet is captured as soon as a battle is over, if it's the first planet, and therefore Aatrox Prime was not an eligible target. But at this point, we're going through another HQ phase. Both of our players have gotten their 4 cards, their 2 resources. Mavros has managed to acquire enough savings that he's put into play a copy of the Sword Brethren Dreadnought at planet number 2. That does happen to be a victory condition planet for Mavros. Like I said before, it's a 7 cost, 3 command icon, 5/6. It's got the Unstoppable specialization. The first time it takes damage, you prevent the first point of damage that round, and then you can trigger the battle ability of the planet it is positioned at. That could be Farron to rout a target non-warlord unit, which includes Synapse creatures, or it could be a forced random card discard, and then if you win a battle at that planet, you trigger the battle ability again. So in some circumstances, that can be rather powerful. This is not necessarily one of those circumstances. Chaplain Mavros has got our initiative tokens. That means whatever planet he sends his warlord to, he might be able to use initiative, or rather retain initiative. So like if Mavros and Subject Omega are both sent to planet number 2, that would be Mavros having the initiative and being able to attack against Subject Omega and potentially bloodying that warlord. But there's some important stuff sitting there in Subject Omega's HQ that I'd not talked about before. So planet number 1, we've got a copy of the 2-cost Toxic Venomthrope, 2 command icon 02. It infests planets when you win command struggles there. If the planet's already infested, you get your choice of a card or a resource. But much more relevant to the conclusion of this game, we've got a copy of Ruined Passages in Subject Omega's HQ. For the cost of 3, it's a signature support. You exhaust and sacrifice it, and you pick a planet, and you ready all of your Gene Stealer trait units at that planet. It includes your warlords, and it definitely includes the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 8 Gene Stealer, 7, not including the Warlord. So it's going to also include the 7 Gene Stealer trait units that might arrive at planet number 2 alongside Subject Omega Exhausted. And that is definitely one hell of an effect. And if our Tyranid player wins the battle at planet number 1, that means Farron is going to be able to rout a target non-warlord unit, and what better unit to rout than that 5/6 Sword Brethren Dreadnought sitting at that planet, and you might even be able to do that prior to Chaplain Mavros triggering its ability. So, to no one's surprise, Subject Omega arrives at planet number 2. Chaplain Mavros also arrives at planet number 2, but we've got that battle at 1 to resolve prior to the the battle at planet number 2, and if Mavros dares exhaust himself, he's going to get bloodied, just like Subject Omega. So let's see how things end up being resolved here. At planet number 1, we picked up a copy of the 0-cost 1/1 command icon Ripper Swarm. It's a limited keyword card, but all those different units sitting at that planet means that our Tyranid gets 2 resources. At planet number 2, unfortunately for Subject Omega, that's going to be a card and a resource for our Space Marine. And at planet number 3, thanks to the Stalking Lictor, that's going to be a couple of cards for our Tyranid. So, note that all Mavros has to do is win a blue planet, and then that is going to be the game for him. That's planet number 2. That's what he's relying on, because obviously he's been beaten economically. Note that at planet number 1, we've got our Virulent Spore Sacs that had been detonated. They deal a point of damage. They infest that planet. The Righteous Initiate prevents that first point of damage, but then it swings for 3. It kills that Ripper Swarm. Now we see a Tyranid being ambushed into play. I suppose Digestion Pool could have been used to spare some resources here, but that's going to be Genestealer Brood dropping into play. It's going to be a copy of Invasive Genestealer being added to Subject Omega's hand. The Genestealer Brood itself is going to swing for 3 and potentially kill the Righteous Initiate. Yep, okay, Righteous Initiate is killed. And what exactly is that event there? That is a gene implantation, it looks like. So gene implantation is after a Genestealer kills, well, destroys an enemy army unit with an attack. You pay 1 resource, and then you return that dead unit back to life, on your side of the table. Theron is going to be captured by our Genestealer. Its battle ability triggers, and that is going to be the Sword Brethren Dreadnought Routed. And it looks like this was prior to its ability being activated. So planet number 1 is going to be added to our Tyranids victory display. That's going to be 2 red material type icons for him. And now what exactly are we seeing? At planet number 2, looks like Mavros is going to be augmented by that Ketachan outpost. If he'd like, he could deal himself up to 2 points of damage to further increase his attack power, but he's already swinging for 4, and it looks like Subject Omega already has 4 points of damage on him. He should only have 2 points of damage because of that faulty Aatrox Prime trigger, but regardless, let's see how things end up going here. Mavros has got initiative, but if he has the audacity to... Yep, he exhausts, he takes a swing, Heavy Venom Cannon removes 2 points of damage, and that is going to be a bloodied copy of Subject Omega. Looks like a copy of Crushing Blow was temporarily used, but, why bother? And I suppose on the topic of why bother discarding a copy of Heavy Venom Cannon if your Warlord was going to be bloodied regardless? So that was a little bit strange, but now Ruined Passages is going to trigger. That's going to be a lot of ready Genestealers, and now we're going to have to play a game called Make Sure That Subject Omega Does Not End Up Being Destroyed. Okay, so there we go. All of those Genestealers ready. Enough of them are able to leverage attacks where that's going to be a bloodied Chaplain Mavros. He's now just a 1/6. Finally, we get around to capturing the first planet. That's going to be added to our victory display for our Tyranid player. We're going to move into... what is presumably going to be our final round here. Yes, this is going to be the final round. It's the victory condition for either of our players. They've each got 4 resources. They've each got 2 cards. Subject Omega has initiative. That means he can show up at planet number 1. He can retreat as his first combat action, or he can arrive at planet number 2, and then he can just try to make sure he gets some cards. So let's see. It looks like that is perhaps actually the GG right there. All right, so let's just call it good game right there. So congratulations to Ryan Murrell for managing to win this one. Chaplain Mavros ended up being bloodied. Really the best that Chaplain Mavros could have hoped for was... I guess dumping a whole bunch of units at planet number 1 and then showing up either at planet number 2 or at planet number 1 and retreating immediately. And with 4 resources at most, what could you have honestly played as a Space Marine that could have stood up to so many Genestealers? There were at least 7 units sitting out there on the tabletop. Ryan had a giant stockpile of resources available to him. Those Genestealer broods had kept his hand well supplied with Genestealers. And of course, over the course of this game, I quickly lost lost track of just how many cards our strong Tyranid economy was generating. So this was a hell of a game. It looks like Chaplain Mavros is not going to be able to win all of them, but definitely let our players know in the comments what you thought of their play, what they could have done better, a bit more optimally, what deck building choices you would have made. Were you in their situation? Do you think that Mavros is indeed best with the Astra Militarum, or do you think he might function better with Tau? So let them know what you may have done differently in regard to deck building and just overall strategy considerations. But as always, a tremendous thanks to the closest thing I have to a local meta, the fine sirs at Omega Sector Gaming, for sending in another video. So dear viewers, I hope you enjoyed today's match, and as always, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, as ever, you're encouraged to share this content, because the more engagement these videos receive, the more individuals end up being exposed to this living card game. They might join our Conquest community, and of course, all together we continue to send the message to Fantasy Flight Games, telling them to continue to support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I would encourage you to do so through Facebook or on Twitter, and if you ever feel any inclination to help support the Hive Tyrant, I would be absolutely honored were you to make any kind of contribution to my Patreon. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and once again, be sure to check back in again soon for much more Conquest LCG content to come.